I just wanted to jump on real quick. This is week 4, day 3 of my 4th Mounjaro injection, which is a 2.5 milligrams. I wanted to talk today real quickly about, I bring up a lot the subject glucose. As you're aware, if you're following me, I wear a Dexcom glucose continuous monitor that's actually through the Levels Health app. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just decided to start wearing this monitor right after I was diagnosed as a pre-diabetic, right before my 59th birthday. And this was something when I was in the doctor's office and we were talking about me being a pre-diabetic. And really, honestly, he did not give me a lot of direction on what I should or shouldn't do. He just said, hey, you need to lose weight, which is how I got on the Mounjaro, or how he prescribed the Mounjaro. But as you know, I deferred and waited to take it. But he really didn't go into the conversation about diet. Should I make any changes to my diet? What should I do to maybe possibly reverse me being pre-diabetic, other than, hey, change your diet and exercise. So when I was doing my research on pre-diabetes and, oh my gosh, not wanting to go into that type 2 zone of being a type 2 diabetic, I started seeing the advertisements for the continuous glucose monitor. So I was like, you know what, maybe I need to look into this a little more and understand what's going on with my glucose. Now keep in mind, prior to that, I was intermittent fasting. And my version of intermittent fasting could have been the 16-8, it could have been the 1 meal a day OMAD. I could say, oh, I want to fast for 3 days. I was doing different kinds of intermittent fasting because, you know, that's a big thing right now where everybody's saying intermittent fast, intermittent fast. So even when I was intermittent fasting, I wasn't necessarily watching, well, what's my carb intake? What is this food doing to my glucose? I wasn't even paying that attention. Now keep in mind too, I actually had done keto in like 2019. I lost weight and did good on it and thought, okay, that's fine. But again, one of my things with the doctor was I needed to watch my cholesterol levels. So we all know with the keto being high fat and all of that, I was like, well, I don't know if I really need to do the keto, what needs to take place. So this is how I got on the glucose train, and I'm really passionate about it now, because as I've been learning what's impacting my body, I really believe and realize there are a lot of us out here who may be what's called insulin resistant, and we don't even know it. So then when you start doing different things, i.e. intermittent fasting, or you trying to change your lifestyle to lose weight, you're not understanding why your body is responding the way it is and why is it so hard for you to lose the weight. Well, one of the things I told you before, and I really can't go into a long detail on this Instagram clip, but I wanted you to know that if you're insulin resistant, i.e. you're going into being a pre-diabetic potentially. Now granted, I've said this before, you can be insulin resistant and not even be diagnosed as a pre-diabetic long before you get the diagnosis of being a pre-diabetic. Meaning, what's happening when you're insulin resistant? It means when you eat food, and you know when we eat food, it's actually converted to glucose. That actually is what we need. Glucose is not a bad thing. I know sometimes when people hear the word glucose, i.e. sugar, they think, oh, terrible, terrible, run, run, run. Well, no, our bodies actually need glucose to survive. So when you eat, what you're eating is converted into glucose. So when you eat that food, you need the glucose to go into your cells and your tissues and your muscles for energy. So what happens is when you eat, your pancreas secretes insulin for it to help facilitate the glucose to go into your cells and your muscles and your tissues. Well, when you keep high levels of glucose constantly in your system, your pancreas is like churning. It's working because it's trying to keep up with the levels of glucose that you have coming in your body, and it's trying to facilitate. It's saying, hey, I got to get this going into the cells and the muscles and the tissues. Well, if you keep elevated levels of glucose and say you're producing the insulin. What happens with insulin resistance is where your cells, your muscles, and tissues, even with the pancreas pumping like it's pumping to get that insulin in there to help facilitate, your tissues and your cells and your muscles start to resist, meaning they're not taking in the glucose like it should. But that's what the insulin resistance is. You know, sometimes I had to actually digest that to understand what exactly is insulin resistance. Now, if it's glucose residual left, depending on where you are with insulin resistance, that can be stored later as fat. So a lot of times when you hear me talking about my levels of glucose and trying to get my A1C levels down and trying to get more control, what I'm doing is looking at those foods that are giving me higher glucose levels than what I really need. Because see, another thing about being pre-diabetic is once your pancreas exhausts what it can to keep up with the foods that you're eating, it stops. And that's when you get into type 2 diabetes. That's the precursor, is that your pancreas can no longer secrete enough insulin to help facilitate the glucose that you're eating into your cells, your muscles, and your tissue. And so then what happens is that's why people have to take insulin shots, because the pancreas can no longer work. But the part I want to talk about is this. You really want to try to give your pancreas a break. So that's why if you're insulin resistant, i.e. pre-diabetic, and you're trying to lose weight, you gotta cut out the refined carbohydrates. You gotta cut out the added sugars. That's just a part of you trying to give your pancreas a break and you trying to heal your body. So when I'm talking a lot about glucose, and you're like, what is this glucose? I'm actually doing what I call the glucose experiment on myself, where I'm trying to figure out how I can bring down my glucose levels. And one of the several ways of doing so is watching the type of foods that I'm eating in order to reduce the glycemic index of what's going into my body. And another way is exercise, because when you exercise, you're actually using up more glucose because you need the glucose for the energy to exercise. So I know this seems like a little long, but I wanted to jump in here really quick and talk to you about your glucose levels and why you may be seeing some of the things that you're seeing and nobody's really explained to you this is what it's all about. So if you want to hear more on that, please just go ahead and hit me with a comment and I'll talk more about it and I'll tell you more about what I'm doing and I'll talk to you about the foods that I'm eating. And for a lot of people, that's probably why the keto works, because they're insulin resistant and they modify their diets where they're not eating the carbs and they're eating a higher fat content diet and they're eating more protein. This is what it all comes back around to. So I just want to jump in. Day 3 of the 4th week is fine, no problems, everything's going great. Again, I'm on this journey to try to do it smart. I'm not trying to see how fast I can drop. I'm trying to see what I can do to reverse my pre-diabetes, to bring down my A1C levels, and to be the best that I can be by doing things, by implementing those things in my diet that will help me have a lifestyle for living. So talk to you later.